Haddonfield historically has been a unique town because our institutions have been held together by succeeding generations of people who are committed to them. If you look, for instance, at the history of the library, you'll see from the time the original library company was founded in the early 1800s, right on down the continuum, the same names overlapping, not throughout the entire history, but there'll be a couple of generations, then that family will move off, but another family will have taken off. And there are names that that come echoing down through. Pennypacker is one. Now Reynolds is another one. And Rhodes is one, from Rhodes Avenue. They gave a legacy that helped to get the library, the Free Public Library, started. So there is this sense of continuity. Same thing is true with our fire department. If you look at the names in the fire department, you will see in there people whose grandfathers and great-grandfathers were firemen, it has carried down through generations like that. So, and many of our institutions here in town have done that because people have moved back, multi-generational families. Well, in those days it was quite different. Again, it was local, it was small. But in those days, the mayor and borough commissioners, and there are 3 commissioners who run the town. And the mayor is not any more powerful than any of the other commissioners. I happen to be director of public works, and I used to tease and say, you know, by that time I had established my educational credentials, and I said, well, I'm in the school business, and I'm an expert in the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, I've got myself elected, and now I got to learn about the 3 T's: trees, toilets, and trash. And that was my job, the 3 T's of Haddonfield, and I learned a lot. But the main thing then, and I think it is now, was service. You didn't do that, I didn't do it anyway, to start a political career. You know, when you run for commission, you don't know what's going to happen. Haddonfield has a tradition that the person with the highest number of votes gets to be mayor, and that has kept politics pretty much out of it because it's just automatic. Well, what I didn't reckon with was that I was 32, 33 years old, and I didn't have any enemies in the town. And when you don't have any enemies, because the other people who were running were all older, and they had had a chance to make some enemies, and a lot of friends too, don't get me wrong. But when you're everybody's number 2 or number 3 choice, what happens is you end up with the most votes. And I woke up the day after election to find that I was the accidental mayor of Haddonfield, and I was no more ready to be mayor than I was to be an astronaut at that point. But I learned fast, and it worked out all right. I insisted that my fellow commissioners dedicate the dump as a park. And they wanted to sell Crowswoods and the dump area to developers. And I thought of it as a natural resource, and I said to them, look, the one thing we don't have in town is a ski mountain or a sledding hill, and I'm going to build Mount Trashmore out there, because in those days you could just take the trash out, dump it, and run a landfill. And it is very costly to dispose of trash. That's one of the town's biggest costs now. Well, what happened, they said, okay, well, they did it to humor me. But what happened is that we ended up with nice playing fields out there, because the state, about 3 years after I left office, decided that local governments should not run their own landfills, and they were going to turn it over to the counties to run. Well, my successors very quickly decided they would abandon the dump and get out of the dump business, because they didn't want all the county's trash coming in here. And the people in Tavistock certainly didn't want that. So that's what happened. But those playing fields out there have been developed now by two generations of my successors, and they have built beautiful fields out there, and that's a real amenity for the town, and I feel very good about, not that I had the foresight that it was going to turn into playing fields, I was just thinking about the trash. This building was started in 1916 or 1917. It was opened in 1917. The part that we're in now is a 1957 addition. The first librarian was Miss Cawley, and she ran the place until 1944, when a graduate of our high school, Miss Cawley got sick and had to retire, and a graduate of our high school, Beatrice Stackhouse, then she wasn't married, became the librarian, and she was the librarian until, I guess, the mid to late 70s. I've lost track on that one. And then Gladys Bewley came in, and then Doug Rauschenberger. And so I've known, except for Miss Cawley, I've known every librarian in this building. The 1957 edition, which, as I say, is this part, more than doubled the square footage, and created the stacks, and really gave the library a good resource base for the town. A family named Nicholson gave this property to the town with the understanding that it would be used exclusively for a library, and then the Rhodes legacy helped to get it started. There had been a free public library in the town, The library tradition starts back in the early 1800s, but they were subscription companies. The free library started around 1900. The Haddonfield Civic Association in those days had just been founded, and it was all men. The women were in the Haddonfield Fortnightly, and the men were in the Haddonfield Civic Association. The women actually ran things, but the men sort of went along, but they had their own group. Anyway, the men of the Haddonfield Civic Association went out and raised, through subscriptions, the money to build the original building, and that's how it was built. It's interesting. Cultural changes are a major thing. I've told this story several times, but when I was 8, 9, 10, it'd get hot in the summer and you don't feel like playing ball in the middle of the day, and there's only so much Monopoly you could play. And there was the Mountwell pool, but I wasn't allowed to go there unless an adult was with me. So, and most of my friends weren't either, so we didn't get there very, very often. But there was the town dump out where the fields are now. Wedgwood was not there. There was a little farmette there, and one of the local police officers had it. His wife, they raised chickens and ducks, and they sold eggs and chickens to people in the town. And on a hot summer afternoon, when there was nothing to do, two of my friends had .22 rifles. Now, I wasn't allowed to have a gun, but half a dozen 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old boys, armed to the teeth with .22 rifles, several boxes of ammunition, would walk from Lafayette Avenue, where I lived, down, or ride bikes, down under the underpass by Wedgwood and down to the dump, and we'd sit on trash piles and spend the afternoon plinking away. If we saw a rat, we'd shoot at rats, and every once in a while a duck might swim by in the Cooper River, one of Mr. Meader's ducks. Sometimes somebody take a shot at that duck. But the change, can you imagine the consternation in this town today if a half a dozen little boys with two .22 rifles and several boxes of ammunition were to be seen walking down? You gotta understand a little bit about Quakers and their notion of the inner light. Quakers believe that there's an inner holiness in everyone. And when Elizabeth Haddon was talking about her community, I think she was talking about a community of people who were motivated by the search for this inner light, this inner godliness. Now, I'm not one to judge, but I don't see a hell of a lot of inner godliness today around here.